Hi there, this episode is an audio rip of a YouTube video. If there are any references to the screen or to the video itself, then be sure to go over to YouTube and actually check out the video, which will be the same title as this podcast. Thanks. Hello there and welcome to a full coverage of BS7671. I say full, not word for word coverage, but a training coverage of BS7671 18th edition. This first video is just an introduction, so an introduction to this series. What we're going to do is we're going to actually deliver training material like would be in a classroom environment via online videos. And if you are in the Facebook groups already, you'll probably be aware that there is going to be some streams, maybe at the weekend or in the evenings as well. Some of you guys work evenings, some of you guys are available to do some feedback and some Q&A and some training and some development on this. But here is the delivery of the material as a VOD, and we'll do some live streams on with training if need be. We're going to go through the book, so do make sure that you have a copy of BS7671. Guides, notes, for your on-site guide. We can refer to them. I may even refer to some other guides, notes as well later on as we go through. But do make sure that you've got a legit hologram in your regulations book, and make sure that you've had a little bit of time to go through it. Now, if your objective to watching these is to just get a little bit of information to then go and pass an exam, you probably best just skipping it, really, because this is going to take a while and it's not really suited for you. What we're going to do here is actually go through the book, and we're going to translate the book. We're going to actually take this blue thing, and we're going to actually make it become a tool, make it become a reference document that you understand and you actually know how to use, instead of a book that you think is an exam that you have to commit to every 3 or 4 years for you to be able to carry on doing what you do every day. When we actually do design work, or we do testing work, we always have to do it in compliance with this standard as well as other standards. So it's very important to actually understand this standard. I work with many electricians, and quite often they always, especially with inspection and testing, they pick on they pick on a common 6 to a dozen things that they know in the regulations: buried cable depths, additional protection, things like that, division of installation. But they have, because they don't have a common or a developed understanding, or they haven't got a fresh understanding. They kind of just become a bit complacent with that, and a lot of their inspections just look the same. The observations are found are the same, and some things creep through because they were a little bit unaware of some other regulations that were in this book. So it is very important to stay up to date. Now, we're not going to try to learn it word for word, because that just sounds like hell. What we're going to do is we're going to understand the purpose of the book, the structure of the book, the format of the book. We will highlight a lot of the key areas in the book, but the bigger picture is we need to understand how the book works, how the book is to be used. And if you're thinking of exam, I won't be training you to pass an exam. I'll train this to understand the regulations. Passing an exam is just a natural side effect, and you will pass, but it's just a side effect of this. I don't train to pass. Alright, so that's not what we're going to do here. We're going to actually develop our understanding of these regulations, and we're going to use them, and we're going to move forward with them. Alright, saying that, if there are some areas of material that are heavily present in exams, from my experience, I may reference it just to give you a little hint that this area needs a little bit deeper reference or a deeper understanding to. If I forget to do that, but when I go back and edit it, I'll probably put a little marker on, such as an exam laptop logo, something like that, just to kind of highlight that. But other than that, yeah. A couple of things we want to talk about to start with. So we understand BS7671 came out 2nd of July, published, and we have this current 6-month window till the 1st of January 2019. Now, it is evident that the likes of Electrical Safety Council and a few training organisations are mentioning that from, I think, June in 2019, they won't allow you to maintain registered electrician status unless you have the 18th edition. So a lot of push, there's a lot of pressure for you to update, for you to upgrade. So a lot of electricians are being pushed into making training decisions, either by going with what's most affordable, which is quite often just a training to pass the exam solution, or you're obviously finding it hard to find the time to actually do that. So hopefully this material will help. Towards the end of it, there is a possible exam solution that I already have introduced to the Facebook community, which we could work with, but you know, you're not committed to that. By all means, contact your local training centres. I can provide you with a we'll do like a little mock exam scenario, and I'll provide you with some kind of evidence of that training experience as well, so you can pass that as evidence. If they will probably, all they'll ask for is money, to be honest with you, but you have it as evidence that you have you have carried out training and you have maintained, you have achieved some level of development before you do an exam. But all that will be done towards the end. A couple of things that we need to understand about the actual standard itself. If you open up the regs book, you're like, oh god, that might be the first thing that you did. You probably grabbed it and you went, and you're like, Jesus. What I want you to do right now is find part 7. Right at the beginning of part 7. Okay, so, I don't normally do page numbers, but for the sake of completeness right now, page 239. Alright, I'm on page 239. What I also want you to do is, so you put your finger in that, I want you to find the beginning of part 1. Alright, which is page 14. Now, when you actually hold that amount in your hand, and you can see that there's a whole that amount there in my hand. That is the main structure of the book. That's what we're mainly focusing on. All this other stuff in here is reference material that will repeat the structure we cover in this section, or we'd have already gone to that area in doing this section. So when you look at the book and you think about how big it is, we're actually mainly going to focus our attention for probably 90% of the training time on this little section. This little what is it? It's about, well, it's less than half, that's for sure. Alright, that's what we're going to focus on, because the remainder of this chunk is all part 7, which is obviously supplementing areas of the main book, and reference material, which we'd have obviously touched on, or you'll have enough time. Okay, so when you actually grab the book and you look at all of that, forget that. It's a simple layout structure, which we'll discuss in a minute. I have a couple of slides. This is obviously the training material I do. So something I normally talk about is you see the IET and BSI. I also have an E5 sticker on mine, same as my guidance notes. But the IET, obviously the Institute of Engineering Technology, they provide JPELs. They are the try to say something nice. I don't know. There's JPEL 64, that's the committee, numbers of pools of people, meet together, tea and biscuits, talk regs, stuff happens. I can do a big video on it. That's not for here, that's for another video, because it will go completely off topic. But they obviously, that's the Engineering Technical Committee, and then you have BSI, the British Standards Institute, who are the publishers of the standard, and they publish many other standards, many other British standards that we should know and understand, and we will use a reference to in this, such as BS 5266, BS 7909, etc., etc. Many of them. Okay. With regards to this document, it's a very good document to have a great understanding of, because it is actually used all around the world. Now, I've done training. I've been privileged enough to do training quite vast around the globe. I've done training quite recently in the UAE, in Dubai and Abu Dhabi, and one of the things I noticed when working over there, delivering some of the training that we created, is when I actually looked into their regulations and their technical regulations. They had DWAR in Dubai, for example, but they that was the legislative standard, but they had these regulation standards as well. And the one on the left, I believe, is the Abu Dhabi one. The one on the right is the latest Dubai one. But these, it's quite interesting. These are a free download over there. They're actually written and sponsored by the local governments and obviously certain authorities. But they're a free download. And we're talking about a lot of material. I mean, you can download them. And this Abu Dhabi one's actually very good as well, because it's like the regs in that there's all the regulations are there, but they've also taken, for example, illustrations similar to those in the on-site guide, also just illustrations of parts of the regulations like panel layouts and things and ideas of switch rooms and things, and they've added them in there. So there's lots of illustrations, there's lots of better guidance, and it's funny because it's as if they've taken the British standard and they've decided to improve it. So it might be worth just, yourselves just looking into them just to see, how the BS 7671 is taken and then just adapted slightly. From a technical perspective, there's not a lot of difference though. I mean, over in the UAE, they have like higher ambient temperatures and they have risk of, IPX6 with regards to dust. Sorry, IP6X with regards to dust and things like that. There's not a lot of difference. So this standard is exported through quite a large area around the world, and that's a good thing to remember. Now, I've already waved the regs book in the air, and obviously the on-site guide, but there's also, I have this one which is now out and stuff, the Guidance Notes 3, and I don't know if you've been fortunate enough to buy the NIC books, or to buy any of the new Scadden books, or Kitcher books, or the Codebreak is coming out soon, and books. There's this common issue when these regulations get updated, and there's a whole industry. The industry gets all excited about the announcement of the new edition, and you're brought through all this new information, these new regulations, these new rules. You'll have exhibitions, you'll have cinema events, evidently now, and you have lots of opportunities, and training is also experiencing this. Everyone is pushing training. It's a shame because the standards of training have depleted significantly. A lot of people are just trying to waive the guarantee of the exam achievement in electrician's face instead of saying, look, this stuff, but let's talk about this stuff again to develop it further. So it's a common feel right now that for Sparkies is regulation time. Let's just throw more money away, because that's quite often how it feels, especially with things like regulation changes, because a lot of these changes, including in this standard, they're either going to be introduced costs to your customer, to yourself and then to your customer, or very, very simple changes in regulations. But all of a sudden, you've got to invest in books, you may have to invest in new certificates, you may have to invest in new software updates, and you'll probably have to invest in training as well. And so, it's very hard to welcome these times, really, when these regulations come in. I myself, I did my apprenticeship from 1998, so I had the yellow book of the 16th edition, and it just turned to the blue book towards the end of my apprenticeship. So I've seen the 16th edition become the 17th, and I was just getting into training about then, and I noticed how there was this huge build up in momentum in the industry about the introduction of the new standard. Not so much as they were when we had updates here and here. They weren't as grand because, I don't know, maybe the number's the big thing. But we've seen it now for a few years, building up to the 18th edition. The 18th edition was, quite an event, apparently. But we're going to talk through this structure, this course structure. We're not going to highlight the changes. We're going to talk through the whole book. This is a regulations course series of videos. I will highlight some areas in more detail, such as, for example, AFDDs, When I come to AFDDs, I'll just cover them as normal as I would in the classroom. So I'll talk about the devices, I'll add a little bit of information about them, but I won't go into them in great detail. What I'll do is I'll create a separate video for that to back that up, so that you kind of can stay on flow. You don't have to completely slow down progression to then talk about something that really fundamentally may not impact you. So, I'll mention this new, give a little preview on it, but then we'll pull another video in of much more depth and reference if you feel you want to consume that extra information. Okay? But moving forward, we got to talk about, it's very easy to say, oh, it's a money-making exercise, but we do need to understand that regulations do need to progress. They do need to move forward, because the way we change our use of electricity has changed. This could be your typical living room on a new build these days. 20 years ago or so, there'd have been one twin socket behind that television. There'd have been one socket in the kitchen with the cooker switch on the other side. When you go to a new home nowadays, you've got numerous points of utilization all over the kitchen, numerous points of utilization all over the living room. We've got lighting systems with Lutron systems and all these other weird branded ones, but it turns out what they are is a series of circuits. So instead of one light circuit arrangement, you've got one light circuit feeding a driver unit, which could have somewhere near 30 different strings of cabling leading off, so that they can control all the lighting in different arrays. We may have speakers in the ceiling, we may have data in the home. So, fundamentally, the utilization of electricity has changed significantly. And sometimes when changes come in, we introduce a regulation, and then sometimes when technology is developed, we have to actually then retract that regulation. We had that in the 16th edition, I think it was, with cage bonding. When cage bonding was introduced for bathrooms, a dedicated 4mm protective conductor, but then they introduced RCDs, and RCDs meant in the bathroom that the need of cage bonding was no longer there. So sometimes as we introduce new things, we have to take things away, and sometimes as we introduce new things or new technologies or new methods of connection, we have to adjust the way we used to do things before. So there is always this need to progress, this need to update. There is obviously harmonization, which we'll talk about in a minute. But think about your typical home, your smart house these days. Everything is controlled to a central point. It's a completely different approach to how we used to do homes 10, 20 years ago. So things are moving forward. And it's not so much domestics, it could be commercial or industrial as well. Technology innovations, we've got to adjust, we've got to adapt, we've got to keep on top of our knowledge on this. Furthermore, we've got changes in protective equipment, changes in equipment itself. So we had wooden frame fuse boards, few years ago now. We have 3036 semi-enclosed rewirables, which are perfectly fine, perfectly normal, still in the regulations. Now we can still design with them. We have some electrical firms suggesting that they are a risk of fire, and illustrating that to clients to scare them into getting new fuse boards, which is a little unethical. But then we have obviously newer fuse boards, newer than this even, because we now have the Amendment 3 versions of 17th edition, the fire-rated ones, but we have obviously split load, we have RCDs, and as you'll see later through this book, we may even start introducing AFDDs into these boards as well. But you can see the number of circuits has increased, the protective devices have improved and progressed. RCDs, SPDs, AFDDs. When these are introduced, we have to both accommodate them with the design of our systems, but we may even have to adjust our regulations to either enforce them or to allow, or to accommodate them, which is slightly different. So these are examples of why we have to update our understanding on the regulations. Then there's the harmonisation thing, which you've probably seen on numerous courses before. We have obviously the British Standard here, the ITBSI, the JPEL 64 Committee, that should say 18th edition now really. Have to comply with the European standard, CENELEC. So if you go to a harmonised document or a European standard in Germany, for example, they'll always start with 603, 64 with regards to low voltage electrical systems that come towards the BS 7671 standard. We'll see an example of that later on. And then there's the IEC standard above. Simple harmonisation, the idea of creating the single market in Europe, etc. Typical harmonisation. You'll notice, good example actually, you'll notice as you go through the book, if we went to part 7, for example, and we just actually went to the beginning of part 7, if I actually went to page 239, if I go to the part 7 special installation locations list, I can see that I have 700 as general, and I've got 701, 702, 703, 4, 5, 6. There's no 707. 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. There's no 713. That's because they exist. They're in Europe. They're just not imported into our standard yet. I believe 713 may be electrical wiring and furniture. I could be wrong with that. But they're a standard that maybe one of our other methods of work, our other standards, our other British codes of practice may supplement, may improve safety for, may make those regulations redundant, and so they're not harmonised yet. So you'll notice some gaps in the book. That's just simply where harmonisation hasn't yet been concluded. Moving on to the layout of the book. This is, again, as I mentioned earlier on, when you pinched parts 1 to 6, that's what you did, is you grab parts 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and 6. The appendices is a reference point, and 7 is a reference point to the rest of the book. This is quite quite a good illustration, because it gets you to understand the big picture of the book, and I'm going to remind you of this quite a number of times as we go through. So, part 1, scope, object and fundamental principles. This is all about telling you what the book is going to cover and what the book's intentions are and how it's going to achieve that. So when you have an electrical design, you need to know if this book is relevant and how it's going to be relevant and how it's going to achieve the relevance, and that's what part 1 does. It lets you know whether or not you need to actually pick up the book in the first place and what the intentions are of that book. Part 2 is just reference, it's just the definitions, you know how definitions work. And it only really gets interesting when we get to parts 3 to 6. So, again, I'm going to remind you of this as we go through, but if you're going to do any design, one of the first things you've got to do is, without sounding too obvious, assess the general characteristics. So, assess what is there, or assess what is needed. So if you've got a client that needs a new, let's say you have a client that needs a shop to be rewired, you're going to go there, and the general characteristics would be to assess the existing supply characteristics. So we'll see supplies in there. So what is their earthing arrangement? What is their supply protective device? Their number of type of live conductors, and then we also consider what they want of the electrical system. So what is their maximum demand once we've applied diversity? How will we achieve compatibility with the existing systems? How will we achieve maintainability? So, all of those questions we have to ask ourselves at the initial point is in assessment of general characteristics. Once we've got that bit of information, we then need to know what the requirements are with regards to the protection that we have to achieve to comply with the fundamental principles of BS 7671. The fundamental principles, which we'll cover in a minute in the part 1 video, is to ensure protection of safety persons and livestock, safety of persons, livestock, and the buildings, and that's what we get to in part 4. So we look at protection against electric shock, protection against thermal effect, protection against overcurrent, and protection against the voltage disturbance. Those are the key ones that we will look for. We have isolation and switching in there as well now, but those are the 4 common things we need to achieve protection for. We must decide if the protection is needed and how we're going to achieve that in all circumstances. Once we've done that, we move on. We select and erect. So we need to know the requirements to select our wiring system, consideration of external influences, selection and erection of our cable sizes, our protective conductor sizes, our switching types, manual switching, emergency switching, functional switching. We have to select and erect. Once we've done that, we've got to commission it, and that's part 6. So it's just like a job. You assess what you need, you're told what to protect, you're told the restrictions of your selection and erection, you are told you have to commission, and that's how the regulations work, just like any installation. Part 7 at the end is where Due to the nature of the location, special installation, special environment, bathrooms, swimming pools, saunas, marinas, inland vessels, horticultural, agricultural, caravan park, caravan, transportable unit, medical location, solar photovoltaic system, or an exhibition shows and stands, yada yada yada. Any of those are applicable to the scale of your system. You would then have to go to that part throughout the document, and that part will supplement those processes we've just discussed. But that's how the book is structured, and that's the kind of bigger picture I want you to understand, because as we get towards the end of this series and we have a question in an exam which says something along the lines of a significant quantity of flammable material, and it'll ask you what the value of significant quantity is, you need to say to yourself, okay, well, that's a flammable material, and I'm obviously thinking about protection against a flammable material. So you'll say, well, that's a protection against the thermal effect. And by that time, hopefully you'll know, well, that's chapter 42. And then you'll go in there and you'll see that it's 25 litres. But, you'll get to that point. So you'll break it down with your understanding of the larger structure of the document. That's where we want to get to. It's not about finding the answer in the book. And something that you won't ever hear me say is look in the index. I can't remember the last time I actually told someone on a training course to look in the index, because we don't need it. It's there as a last resort in an exam if you need it, but if you understand the book, you understand the structure, you understand the layout, you won't need it. It won't be needed. Alright? But that's what we're going to do through this book. Just to finish this off, let's a couple more slides, just in case you haven't looked at these before. Let's understand how to read a regulation number. So this will become evident as we progress, but when you have a regulation number such as this one, regulation 531.2.1, we always read from the left, so it's 553, 531, 531.2, 531.2.1. It's not, 53 and then 31. It's always read from the left, and it's part 5. Yeah, and then the next number goes with it, so it's 53, and that's chapter. So you'll notice that it's the third chapter of part 5, but it's actually chapter 53. The very first part of BS 767 is part 1. So when you look in the regulations and you look at the chapters, you'll notice the very, very, very first chapter in the book is chapter 11, because it's part 1, the first chapter, it's 11. There is no part 0. So there is no chapter 1. There is no chapter 2, 3, 4, 5, etc. So don't drag on with that. This is just basically just housekeeping from a training perspective. But do familiarise yourself with how to identify sections, groups, chapters, etc. Because if you do that, you'll start to identify the bold headings of the sections. And the bold headings of the sections are very important. Because when you come to a question such as let's say the question regards to the selection of a device for RCD protection, you'll need to know that that's selection and erection of wirings of electrical equipment, part 5. But then you go into there and you look for the chapter for the devices, and then you look at the section title for RCDs. So in this case, this example here, actually, this is an overcurrent protected device. So we go, okay, the regulation we're looking for is with regards to overcurrent protected device used to protect against electric shock. So it's selection and erection, part 5, and it's a switching device, so 53. Because 52 is regards to wiring, live conductors and wiring systems. 53 is regards to devices and switches, etc. And once we're in 53, we're looking for something with regards to protection against electric shock, 531. And still, there's further division because there's RCDs, overcurrent protected devices, and so then there's a subgroup of 531.2, and then there's a regulation. This section here, this section here would have, would be nice and bold and big for you to see, so you can easily find it. Alright, we'll get to that point and we'll kind of highlight them as we push through. But quite a lot of the times as we go through, we're going to say, right, let's step back and say, right, where are we at? Are we in thermal effects? Are we in protection against electric shock? And then we'll break them down into smaller chunks so that you can kind of absorb them individually, and then we'll push through. We've got numbering. Any regulation that ends in .1, .2, .3, .4, that's on the international level. If it's now .101, 102, 103, then for the past few editions, that's been a European specified regulation. So that means the regulation is in the European CENELEC harmonised suite of standards, but does not exist on the international level. There are a couple of regulations that are .101, .102, .103. If it's a UK specific regulation, so it's in the UK only and is not in Europe, then it starts with .201, .202, 203, etc. There's quite a lot of those, ring final circuits being one of them. The new fuse boards, the fuse boards in the home, these are UK solutions to problems, and so they're UK regulation numbers. Alright, I mean, hopefully that's not too much of a mouthful, but do prepare to kind of go through the videos at your own pace. Do come back to me with any questions if you want. Or you can wait until I do a stream. I'll give you some Skype information as well in a couple of days once I kind of finalise all that stuff. I need to kind of set that all up. But yeah, consume some of this, some of these videos. I'll get some more material out as soon as I can pushing forward. But I won't upload this video until I've got a couple more to upload with it, so you can I want you to be able to consume a few videos at a time if you have that time. Alright, but we'll move forward, and so the next video is going to be part 1. Alright, scope, object, and fundamental principles. Next video, I'll see you on that one.